Alright, so I'm back once again with another Nikon camera, and once again I have a Voigtlander lens on it, a sight that's becoming a little bit more common. This one, unlike the previous 85mm Lanthar, is a wide angle. It is a 35mm f2.8 Skopar lens. So a decent number of these were made in Nikon S mount. I don't know exactly how many. I've heard as few as 600, but I suspect the numbers are quite a bit higher than that. And this is one of the more common of these S-mount lenses you'll find. They're also very, very common in Leica M mount. It seems to be the exact same lens, but just in Leica M mount, and I think they usually have that kind of little Leica focusing tab thing on the side. This one has a rather interesting plastic rim that goes around it. When you look at it, you might think that's kind of weird. That looks like some aftermarket thing, and it looks kind of cheap. But it actually comes with pretty much all these Nikon lenses from what I've seen. A lot of times they have been kind of thrown away or broken or separated, but they were sold with these from what I've seen. And I actually kind of like it. It actually adds a lot of, just a lot of, I don't know what we call it, grip, where you can kind of hang on to something when you're focusing the lens. The lenses have a nice, smooth focus throw. They have the aperture ring. It stops on full and half stops, kind of like the Lanthar, and it kind of clicks into place so you can hear it. I have to say, all in all, the ergonomics of this lens are great. There's some of the best ergonomics on any Nikon S-mount lens I've used so far. But it is kind of a weird looking lens. With that plastic piece, it looks very, very cheap, and you have that strange screw mount thing right here that kind of stands out. I don't love the look of it, but all in all, I have to say, the feel of it's really nice. It also has a interesting little lens hood. It's got a very low profile lens hood, and I think all the wide angle lenses came with one of those. There's also a 25 f4 and a 21 f4, which kind of fell in line with the old Nikon super wide angle lenses, and they all included this exact same little lens hood. I think there was also a 28 f3.5, but for some reason that one seems to be exceptionally rare. But they are out there. And of course Voigtlander made external viewfinders for all of them. Most of them were kind of crappy plastic viewfinders, but the one in the case of the 28, I think there was a pretty good solid metal viewfinder for that one, and I think there might have been a metal viewfinder for the 35 as well, but unfortunately they're kind of rare. But if you can find them, I've heard they're very good. They are bright line finders, so they have a pretty broad field of view, and you have the frame lines in the middle, usually with some sort of parallax correction marks, so you get a little I kind of prefer those. I don't know how to explain it, but they just, I think they're easier to use than a lot of the Nikon ones that have a little screw on the back where you have to adjust it, because you actually have to stop and look away and adjust the screw to get proper parallax correction, whereas with the bright line finders, you just have to kind of mentally adjust and not pay attention to that little top part of the dotted line. So, you know, that's something I don't have for this camera, but I would kind of like to pick up one or two of those finders, but that's a whole different story. So as per this lens, I have liked it overall. I wouldn't say I've been blown away by it or it's one of my absolute favorite lenses. For the most part, it's pretty comparable to the Nikon. And when I think about that, both quality and cost, they're pretty comparable to each other. I would say the Voigtlander has way better ergonomics. Just the usability of it is really nice. Supposedly these lenses look really nice on color film, but from my experience, I haven't been blown away. They look okay, but I think the Nikon lenses look just as good on color film. I think they look quite nice on black and white film. I like just the overall quality of them. They seem to have a slightly different, I guess more modern bokeh rendering than a lot of the old Nikon lenses, and they do seem to be a little bit sharper, especially this 35 compared to its Nikon counterpart. It's not a massive difference, but I just think it is noteworthy because there's always some sharpness hounds out there who that's the end-all be-all with photography is just the sharpness, sharpness, sharpness. That's not really the case for me, so this isn't necessarily my favorite lens, but I do like it. It's hard to really say much more about it. It's a pretty good lens. I'm tempted to keep comparing it to the Nikon and like the Kimura lens, but I actually want to do a whole separate video where I compare all those lenses together and kind of show different images taken on them and talk more about the ergonomics and like bokeh quality and depth of field and things of that nature. So that lens review or lens roundup comparison type thing will be coming eventually, but knowing me, it'll probably take several months. All in all, I like this lens. It works very well in the SP with the little 35mm viewfinder you have right here. I've used it quite a bit on the S3 as well because that has the 35s in the primary finder. I just decided to put it on the SP for now because I kind of like the look of it. Again, there's not really a whole lot more I can say about this without spoiling the next video, but it sounds like it's a pretty solid lens and like it's a pretty reasonable option compared to the Nikons, but I would say in reality, it's extremely comparable to the Nikons. I would say the price is about the same, maybe a little bit more expensive, and I would say that quality-wise, they do vary a little bit, but it's kind of one of those things where it's very minor little details that aren't things that some people are really going to pick up on. Now, one thing I will note is with this lens, it had a slight amount of haze in it. And from what I've heard, that's pretty common with these Voigtlander lenses. So when you buy them, I would try to suggest having it in hand and looking at it and like holding up a flashlight behind it and shining through to try and make sure there's not any haze. I got this one really cheap, so I wasn't too concerned with that. And it doesn't seem to have affected the image quality, but there is a little bit of haze there, and I even opened it up and tried to see if I could clean it out, but it seemed to be in between two elements. All the elements are kind of like bound together in these metal tube things that you can't really get in and clean very accurately. There's only essentially like two groups in it, two groups that are separate. I think it's 4 groups total, maybe 5. But it's a pretty solid lens, and I like it. I do take it out a fair amount, but that's mainly just because I really like 35mm lenses. I could pretty happily exchange this for any of the other 35mm lenses I have, but again, that's kind of going to be a future video. I believe there are technically different versions, some that are single and multi-coated, but I'm not 100% sure about that. I've heard reference to it before, but I can't say I've really seen many of them. So that might be something to consider if you really want to shoot it on a specific film type. You might want to get the corresponding coatings to go along with it. But then again, I don't know how rare some of them get. I don't know what the production numbers were. It could have been 600 single-coated, 600 multi-coated. I don't know for sure. But pretty solid lens. I don't know if it necessarily lives up to the reputation it has. Like I said, a lot of Leica users will have this as a kind of walking around daily use lens and swear by it. And I gotta say, it's not bad, but I don't know if it's up to that quality where you could compare it to like a Summicron or something and be like, wow, this totally holds its own compared to a Leica Summicron version 4, because that's not gonna be the case. It's a pretty solid lens, but it does have some drawbacks, and in a lot of ways, like I've said about some of the other lenses, it's just kind of unremarkable. When you have as many lenses as I have, you just come to a point where a lens is a lens, and sometimes it just doesn't really matter that much. If it's got a reasonable aperture rating, if it's a focal length you can work with, it's good enough. It doesn't necessarily have to be in great condition. It doesn't need to have a super fast aperture. It doesn't need to have some sort of special coatings or some weird macro ability. A lot of times just having a good fast 50mm lens and a decent wide angle lens is really all you need. And this definitely fits that category, but if I had a choice, I don't know if this would be my primary lens, but I do like it. But again, it's very comparable to the Nikon, and I kind of prefer the Kimura to both of those. So, interesting lens, but if you're really on a budget, might not be something you necessarily want to go out and invest in right away. So I got plenty of photos coming up on black and white and color film, so stay tuned for those.